Hey everybody, we are finally back out in the field here, and we'll be doing our first of several damage reports, kind of giving you guys some information on how the cold hardy citrus are doing out here in our trial rows. Keep in mind the way we have things planted here, we have 2 rows of primarily already established varieties with maybe just a couple exceptions. So these are varieties that for the most part are readily obtainable or easier to obtain than these, of course, which I'll be working on making obtainable, because on the left here, this is a developing row of our seedling selection. So these are zygotic seedlings and different hybrid seedlings that stood out to us, and now we're testing their hardiness out here compared to everything else that already exists. As you can see though, everything out here has actually seen some pretty cold temperatures. I was really surprised by this recent cold wave. We saw as low as 16.9 degrees out here, so just about 17 degrees for a couple nights. And on top of that, this field seems to get a lot of very strong winds. So between the 17 degrees and all the winds, a lot of these citrus are looking rougher than you would think, because, well, and pair that too, we're full sun out here. We're blinded by the sun. And for those of you who know hardy citrus, you know that the enemies of any type of citrus you're trying to keep alive in the winter are cold, wind, and sun. Believe it or not, having the citrus out in full sun and the winds can lead to desiccation and bark cracking and all sorts of negative outcomes. So what we have here is actually a very challenging circumstance for these trees for our zone. Despite being a warmer zone, we have them in a pretty tough situation. So if these varieties make it out okay at the end of the winter, it's a pretty darn good testament to their hardiness. And you're about to see there's already some pretty stark differences between some of these. But without further ado, let's show you guys. Again, keep in mind, this is after 17 degrees Fahrenheit and very windy conditions and full sun. So that is our reference here. But with these seedling varieties we have in the row here, all of these you can find more information on our website. We have a section that says new citrus varieties, and there will be data and kind of logs kept on all of these different trees here, and we'll be updating those profiles as time goes on. But you'll find information about their general growth habit, pictures of what they look like, pictures of their leaves, kind of like, are they trifoliate or unifoliate, and any preliminary, notes about the fragrance from their leaves, things like that. So it'll give you all those little details, and we'll keep it documented so that throughout time we can really see what's going on with these and really see if they stand a chance in colder climates, or, eventually when the day comes, hopefully some of these will produce some good fruit too, or at the least be very good ornamentals. But to start now, we have our Tri 4N, which I gotta say so far, if I could get that to focus, our theories have been correct about this. This is a tetraploid selection of Tri, and so far it's probably one of the best looking plants out here. I mean, Tri itself, which we do have over here, despite this one actually not dropping its leaves, which I've heard that some Tri hold on to their leaves, whereas others are more deciduous, so this particular strain seems a bit more evergreen. But I mean, just for reference, normal Tri is like completely unbothered by the cold here. I mean, it looks excellent, and well, that's no different for Tri 4N here. And on top of that, I pointed this out before, but Tri 4N is a very vigorous grower. So that one did really well. We got 2 clones of that. Tri here, actually not doing too bad either. The leaves look fairly decent, and even on some of our very hardiest citrus out here, you could tell a lot of the leaves are destroyed. They're completely desiccated by the winds, plus the cold too. So a lot of these plants, the leaves do not look happy after the cold that we've seen. So the ones that do look happy, that's a pretty good sign. And this could be looking a lot worse. Some of them did shrivel up a bit, especially towards the top, but most of the plant looks pretty good. So I'm already pleasantly surprised with the hardiness on Bai Tai Tri. And for the most part, the bark looks pretty decent too. I'm not noticing too much shriveling, or I noticed on some of the ones that are more damaged that we'll get to, they kind of have like white pitting and other damage like that, but I don't see any on Bai Tai Tri. Similarly, Lamandarin also looks pretty good, the Ventura Lamandarin. It's starting to drop its leaves now, but at first, when we first got like low 20s and 19 degrees, it looked pretty good. But now that we've gotten a little lower than that, you know, once we hit closer to the 17 here, now it's starting to shed some leaves. So that's okay. I'm not sure if it likes to be deciduous, but it's being forced into it, as are a lot of the plants. Same story with Dimicelli. Dimicelli was looking really good after the 20s, but now that we're in the teens, now it's dropping some leaves. But besides that, I think the plant itself has held up really, really well. Dimicelli definitely seems like a hardy plant, and I think the one we have on the right here, I mean, these are both the same one. I don't know if this one thickened up a little better, but it seems to be a little better than this one. Either way, they both look pretty good otherwise. Just a little shrivel action, which you'll see, again, that's common with everything we're going to see. Our unifoliate swingle here, we're calling this improved swingle for now, because you could tell it looks fairly different. It held up really, really well. Kind of similarly, it's holding most of its leaves, and yeah, I hardly see anything wrong with the plant. It looks great after that cold, so completely unbothered. Our next one here, Triclemuse number 1, so far also has me pleasantly surprised. I think we made a few very good selections here so far. I mean, everything up till now, again, some of these aren't my varieties, but in terms of the Tai Tri 4N, Bai Tai Tri, and now Triclemuse number 1, I mean, this thing looks really good considering how much it resembles Clemuse 2-2, which is, of course, its mother. But it does have enough trifoliate in it to make it very hardy, and it's another really vigorous seedling. I mean, for a first-year tree, it's almost my height, which is unbelievable. Next to it, we have one of our open pollinated Saccatons. Actually not looking too bad, and it has some really tender growth at the top that's not dead, which is crazy after that wind and that cold. The very tender stuff here, which is completely melted on some of these, completely gone, still holding up good. So I'm actually really happy with the hardiness on this one so far. And the leaf type, I'm not sure what pollinated this one, if it is just a interesting strain of Saccaton, or if it has like Taiwanica or Clemuse in it, but it does have a little purplish tips on the thorns and leaves during certain times of year and certain temperatures. But I mean, that hardiness is looking great, and I think it already has a nice leaf shape. Regardless of what this is, I think it's a winner. Next up here, Triclemuse number 2, looking a little toasty, but this one's actually really hardy, and it is fairly deciduous, so it's already dropped most of its leaves, and it strongly resembles trifoliate, contrary to the other one, but I think it's going to be a lot hardier and maybe not taste as good. So whereas this one I have higher hopes for taste, this one not so much, but it could make a really good hardy counterpart. So this one may be better for the people in colder zones, and I may want to get this one to Mellon, Pennsylvania to trial. I'm a little sad about our pseudo yuzu. Is it even still alive? Oh man, yeah. It's looking pretty rough, I gotta say. I don't know if this one's making it through the winter. It's completely damaged. All these leaves are looking terrible. It's got pitting all along. You could see even the thorns are kind of yellowing and fading away on me. Some of the thicker stuff I'm sure is still alive, so we'll see if it grows back from the damage. But so far this selection is not looking hardy, not living up to that yuzu name, so I'm kind of disappointed. It's still really pretty, so I don't know if I'll still keep. I mean, I did root some cuttings of it at least, so I don't know if I'll still keep it more as a potted plant, which I might, but as a hardy plant out here in the field, it is not proving itself. It's seeming to be our least hardy selection that we've made so far, so kind of a bummer, but given its appearance, I guess I shouldn't have expected too much from it. The one next to it, however, I think is actually doing pretty good. This is our little leaf saccaton, and I'm not sure if this one is tetraploid, but it does have a very compact, very dwarf growth habit here, and it's a very interesting grower. It's very different from the rest, but it seems to resist the cold fairly well. Some of the older leaves are actually more damaged than the newer leaves, which is contrary to how some of these other plants have been. But honestly, for the most part, it looks really good. So this may be a novelty hardy citrus if it makes it through. So we'll see how it goes. But so far, doing a lot better than its neighbor. That's pretty sad, but that's all right. That's why we do this. This is how we filter out these varieties and find out what works. We don't know till we test it out. Some surprise here. I'm looking at this as I'm passing by. I mean, it might be because some of that growth's a little newer. This one actually doesn't look bad, so I think that's just a newer shoot there. Rusk citrange, looking pretty rough, but I think it's just due to drop its leaves. The actual stems underneath look pretty okay. Trifiola, actually, so far has seemed pretty hardy. We are starting to notice some leaf curl now, but up until then, these thick green leaves have looked great. The stem looks excellent. I mean, these plants look very hardy except for like the very young tips and where it's trying to fruit there. Some of this newer growth and younger leaves are all getting zapped, but you could see even on this plant, which held a little fruitlet there, it looks good otherwise. No damage on the Trifiola except for very new, kind of vigorous growth that was shooting out when it wasn't supposed to. We visited Thai Tri already. Thai Tri's looking really good, even though this one appears more evergreen, which I don't mind actually. I don't mind having a hardy evergreen version of Thai Tri, so that's okay, but I am noticing more on that one. These smaller ones are a bit younger, so this may be the difference here, but we are noticing some leaf damage on those, so that might be due to that, but kind of similar thing, the OP Saccaton that we pointed out over there. The really tender growth is miraculously still alive on these. It's doing a lot better than expected, so that's kind of one of those things you would think on a lot of these hardy citrus that the growth has to be hardened off, lignified in order to be hardy. You know, you'd want it dormant and lignified, but I'm noticing that's not the case with all of these. Some of these do have some hardiness even when they're tender, so there might be something going on there. Maybe at a chemical level, I don't know exactly, but very interesting to see that difference. We have our Ichang Pepita looking really good. No surprise there, this thing reliably survives this area, so that's a really good sign for anyone looking for these. This is the one that doesn't really have any juice inside. It's more of an ornamental, and if you have any use for the peel or the pith, but it's a very hardy plant, so that's pretty cool, and I do want to use this actually for breeding purposes. Yuzu next to it. So far, Yuzu has actually held up really well, and the leaves look pretty good. It looks a little sadder than when I've seen it before. It is showing slight damage in some spots, but honestly, Yuzu looks better than some of the hardy citrus so far, which is really incredible. Similarly, Clemuse 2-2, the more lignified portions look good. The softer portions look terrible. The portions where it kept growing when it wasn't supposed to, I warned you, it's getting fried completely. So this one will have damage. However, it does seem relatively hardy otherwise into the teens. Same thing with Ichang Lemon. Don't let the look deceive you. The actual stem portions are looking pretty good, and the portions that are the oldest look unfazed completely. So it's very hardy on the old growth. On the newer shoots, you know, that more flexible stuff, they're the ones getting fried. You know, that just goes for anything. Again, there are slight differences. Tri seems to be a little more immune to that, but generally speaking, still tender growth is tender growth. It's never as hardy. Before we get to our disappointments here, Morton Citrange. You can see on that old growth, Morton Citrange is looking excellent and unbothered. Newer growth, not so much, but that goes for pretty much all of these. We're seeing some leaf curl, but no actual damage. Now, Karaji and Shaquasha. Shaquasha seems a little better out of the two. I think it's still got some healthy stems down there, but the tips, now we're seeing some dieback. Leaves not looking too great. Karaji, this one sprouted out a bit later in the season. I don't know how much of the main stem is going to make it, but I was looking close at a lot of these branches, and they don't look like they're going to survive. So Karaji might be giving up early on us, but again, it got so cold so quick after a very warm fall. Karaji may just not have been as prepared, but I did keep some in the greenhouse anyway. I'm not losing Karaji as a whole, but this particular one may be a goner. We'll see, but it's looking pretty bad compared to some of the other stuff. Thomasville, doing decent. The leaves are finally showing some signs of damage. They were looking great up until now, and the stems look perfectly okay too. So Thomasville is very hardy, but the leaves under these conditions, not so much. Let's see, C35, similar thing, getting ready to drop those leaves. The stems, though, seem to be okay on that one, so doing good. Poncerus Plus, do I really have to tell you guys on this one? It's doing just fine. Anything that is pure trifoliate, for the most part, is going to be okay. There might be some strains that are less hardy, but not enough to make a difference here. Now, for our Prague Chimera here, I noticed something interesting with these, and I don't know if this is generally true with Prague, but a lot of ours put out some shoots late into the year with this warm fall, and those actually got zapped by the cold. I pruned them off already, but those got zapped once we got into the low 20s. They were that tender, so I actually pruned a good bit off of these just to make sure I could save some cuttings to graft out some trees for you guys, because otherwise we were actually going to lose a lot of our potential trees that we would have made. But, you know, the plant itself, the branches that are hardened off are doing just fine. And I imagine most of these are going to drop their leaves. But some are hanging on really nicely and looking excellent. So there's no question that Prague's hardy, but it does have to be fairly lignified. It does have to harden off before the cold. X639 is particularly hardy, I noticed. It is surprising me so far, because even the tender growth, which is now looking a lot worse, when we got in the low 20s, this still looked perfect, and it actually had little blooms on it too. After seeing, like, it must have been like 21 degrees or 22 degrees, it still looked okay. So the plants are actually doing pretty good. Starting to get some leaf curl and leaf drop now, but otherwise a very hardy plant. So happy to see that with X639. We have a bunch of those citranderans there. After those, we got our US 812, getting ready to drop some leaves, but the stems look pretty unfazed. You can tell these are just about to shed everything all at once, but these plants themselves have done pretty good for first year grafts. In terms of the actual growth, they seem to collect a little bit of this, like, I'm not sure exactly what the black look to it is, that black substance. You guys might be able to tell that patchiness. I'm not the best when it comes to diseases and fungi and things like that, so if you happen to know, I don't think it's overly concerning, and I've seen it before on other citrus, but I just noticed that US 812 is one of our only varieties that seems to show that, so that's pretty interesting. This is all more Prague, so we could still cover a few more on this side. Dragon lime, looking great, you know, getting ready to drop those leaves, but the plant itself looks healthy. I really wish it tasted better, or maybe I'll get a better tasting fruit in the future, but it's a really cool, funky looking plant. I really do like dragon lime for its appearance. Bishop citranderan, looking very good out here too. No real issues with Bishop. We have small ones and big ones. They're all in different forms. They grew kind of weird this first season, but doing really good. This one is just about done with all its leaves. I do believe it's been reported that Bishop can survive down to around 2 degrees Fahrenheit or so, but it will receive damage by that point. So it's hardy into single digits, but not sure exactly how low it can go before it gives up the ghost. On this side, after the prog, we do have our Conestoga unifoliate selections, and Conestoga 058 is getting ready to drop its leaves now, because otherwise it's fairly evergreen, but these are absolutely shriveling up out here. But I know the plant itself is very hardy, and I know that because this was an extremely tender shoot on it right before we got the cold, and only the very top is dying back, and even then just barely. I mean, I'm amazed with how tender this was, how well it took the cold. So if that's a testament to why Conestoga 058 is so hardy, there is something going on with it besides just, normal dormancy and lignification, because even the tender growth is extremely hardy too. Again, that was more tender than any of the other tender growth that I've shown you. And 067, at least in this context, they're both grafted onto the sit range, and it dropped most of its leaves, and it's very hardy. So even on the trifoliate here, they grew a little bit different, but similar thing. They're getting ready to drop their leaves. And 058 is looking really good. 067 grew a little more vigorously on this one, so it was a little more tender, a little bit more shriveled looking there. We have our, what are these? After Bishop, I think this starts, we have some Dunstan. So this is the start of the Dunstan Citramello. These have all looked very, very good. Even the more tender growth that we've seen. I mean, we are seeing some of these younger leaves kind of shedding, and that's no big deal, but the actual branches and stuff, they look perfectly fine. Most Citramellos are fairly reliably hardy here. And I did remove a Citramon to put in the greenhouse, but that's because I wasn't sure on exactly how hardy it would be in this context. But look at this. This is one of our best looking plants, and I don't know if it's because it's a little shielded by these US 942s, but that is gorgeous. That dark foliage, I mean, it looks undamaged, unscathed by 17 degrees Fahrenheit and strong winds. So Citramon may be more hardy than I expected. And US 942, unsurprisingly, also looking really good. It had some tender growth that finally got damaged. But other than that, it's just getting ready to drop most of these leaves here. But everything else looks just fine. So I'm sure this one will be a very hardy one. Sacaton Citramello, I think, right? Is that what we're looking at? Yeah. Sacaton Citramello also looking good. Same thing as Dunstan. The ones with the newer growth looking a bit more fried, but the older ones look really good. 5-star Citramello. Most of these are getting ready to drop all their leaves too, but these I also know are hardy to much colder areas than here. Mel grows these in Pennsylvania too, so I don't think we're going to have trouble with these, but after reviewing that Bishop Citramello, I might graft out my Swingles over there and a couple of these to add those to the rows, because I'm going to want more than one. I know that much. 5-star was still a good Citramello, but man, that Bishop Citramello is on a whole other level. But yeah, these are doing really good nonetheless. We have some 942s grafted on trifoliate, doing about equally as well, and US 852 also looking great. A little bit of leaf curl, no damage whatsoever. We got plenty of those here. One we pruned back, and we have a pure trifoliate here. That is our Tuckahoe trifoliate selection. Just one with a bit improved taste, nice quality fruit, and very hardy, and completely dropped its leaves and went dormant before everything else. No surprise with it coming from New York, so very hardy there. We have our Benton Citrange, which these are kind of wrapping up here. They did grow a little bit later into the year, so seeing a little more damage on the leaves and stuff, but not a huge deal. Those will catch up a bit next year. And yeah, we do have our Swingle back here. Again, I may top work these with that Bishop Citramello, that improved Swingle strain. But But otherwise, I know these are hardy here. They grow around here. I don't anticipate any issues. And the leaves look fairly good, again, on the older growth here. And you can see that. That's just the theme. A lot of these leaves, they also have their own intrinsic hardiness that's directly proportional just to how old they are and how long they've been on the tree. But we can see across the board, most of our stuff actually looks pretty good. Some damage on some plants that put out some tender growth. Others, surprisingly, no damage, which I would have expected on their tender growth. But pretty interesting to see. Karaji, Shikwasha, unsurprisingly, being some of the most damaged and some of the most edible. Ichang lemon as well. It's just all that new growth on that one. It's just not as hardy on that new growth. But yuzu, quite surprising. Clemuse as well. Tai Tri and the different Taiwanica related selections all doing great. And the Clemuse hybrids also doing really well. So I'm quite happy with what we are seeing so far, and especially with our seedling varieties. So stay tuned, guys. We're going to be posting updates on them, and I will be auctioning them off / selling them in the spring if we have any extras propagated that we can safely give away. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little update. Again, this is our first cold damage report. If we see some even colder weather ahead, I will surely update you guys with another one. But until then, let me know how your guys' trees are doing wherever you are, and if you've seen even more cold with some of these. And I'll be curious to hear how it's going. But I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.